Everyone, and welcome into the crowded booth. Today, Will Maness joins me as we talk Auburn recruiting. Number 5 overall class per 24/7 Sports, both their rankings and the composite ranking. It's impressive, and the Tigers continuing to add big pieces throughout the month of June. We talk Auburn recruiting here on today's episode of the crowded booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The crowded booth with Bryce Koon.
All right, well, everyone, we welcome you in. Hey, quick little spot right there, but we welcome you in. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Will Maness. We hope you're having a fantastic Monday evening. If you're watching this, if you're listening in the podcast form, it's coming out over on through our Believe platform over there on Tuesday morning. Will, I know you've been down. I know you've been down and out a little bit about Auburn. When you see that big number 5 there next to the 24/7 Sports, both their ranking and the composite ranking, and then obviously some of the pickups, Alvin Henderson being one of the latest, kind of make you feel good about kind of where Auburn is overall recruiting-wise as they wrap up kind of OV season here in the month of June.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun time right now to be an Auburn fan, and I haven't been able to say that for a while. And I really don't know how to feel. Like, I've forgotten what this feeling's like, having a top 5 recruiting class. But, you know, it's a great sign. It was just a matter of time with Hugh Freeze. I mean, when he was hired, you knew he was going to come in and recruit. He was going to really work to raise the talent level at Auburn and get Auburn back to where it should be, which is competing for SEC championships and national championships. And he's done a really, really, really good job in a really, really short time. You know, as negative and as down as I've been, I still think, you know, he's probably a year away, and in a lot of ways, he's really a year ahead. I mean, I would have never thought, you know, 2 recruiting cycles in, he would have a top 5 class. It's really, really, really incredible.
Yeah, and you look, I mean, he said this, and I was in Nashville last year when he stood at the podium and said, you know, the talent level is not where we need it. You know, and he kind of was vocal about that. You've actually been kind of critical of that. Like, you don't like that messaging. And I understand that to a certain extent, but like now, especially in the transfer portal era, especially in kind of this win now mode that you kind of have to be at Auburn, especially in the SEC, as they add 2 premier programs in Oklahoma and Texas, the time is now. And you're starting to see him stack. You know, they had a good transfer class, felt like they had a decent recruiting cycle last year. The offensive line, you know, stacking those guys would be nice. Would be nice to see more of. But overall, this is a pivotal year both on the field and in the recruiting cycle for Hugh Freeze. So we're going to talk a couple things about what Auburn has been able to do. And we kind of started off, Will, with kind of who is in the boat for 2025. It's an impressive class, number 5 overall. Kind of walk us through, I don't even know, I'm going to look here once again, how many total commits. They have 16 total commits. We don't have to break down all of them, but just kind of your feeling on who's already in the boat, who you like out of that mix.
Yeah, so who's in the boat? I mean, if you follow Auburn football on Twitter, you see Hugh Freeze. He's posting pictures of him holding a big bass whenever he gets a recruit. So that's kind of where that comes from, playing into that. But this class, I mean, I think it's a really good class, especially in comparison to last year's class. Obviously, the wide receivers last year really headlined that class. And this year, you look at these top commitments, they're all on the defensive side of the ball, which I'm happy to see that he's not forgetting that side of the ball. I mean, headlined by a 5-star defensive lineman from Opelika, Malik Autry. I mean, to have this guy in your backyard and to not let him go, you know, to that other school in the state is huge. It's huge. You know, Hugh Freeze has talked since day one. We've got to recruit the state of Alabama better. And, you know, in my opinion, you got to recruit 30, 40, 50 miles around Auburn a whole lot better. And this is Malik Autry's a key piece. They get Jacaleb Falk. He's committed from Highland Home, the younger brother of Auburn defensive end Keldrick Falk. So getting the brother in, always good, always a good sign when you can have brothers come play the same place. And Highland Home kind of turning into a little bit of a pipeline for Auburn. Getting the Falk brothers, Auburn recruiting Highland Home, South Alabama really well. The big prize from last week's round of commitments, Eric Winters, the 4-star safety from Enterprise, really big get. Defensive back is a thin position. It's going to be a pretty thin position this year on the field for Auburn and moving forward. So to get him in, he's the top-rated defensive back for Auburn. They like him a lot. They love his versatility. They, see him play at safety. He can play corner if he has to. Really good size at 6'2", 200 pounds. A lot of star potential, a lot of potential with him. Moving on, we talked about offensive line. They've got 2 big offensive tackles, a pair of 4 stars. First one, Tavares Dice out of Langston Hughes in Fairburn, Georgia, which, a lot of Auburn fans, myself included, thought Langston Hughes, it was pretty close to becoming a pipeline for Auburn. Things didn't turn out that way, but they're still going over there to Langston Hughes, Fairburn, right outside of Atlanta, and recruiting it well. Card Smith, the other offensive lineman, big kid, 6'5", 293 from Mobile. Gonna play on the outside, got to have tackles. And last year, Auburn struggled to get offensive tackles in their class. They had to go into the transfer portal. Percy Lewis, that big one, coming from Mississippi State, play left tackle. So, they're getting their high school offensive lineman. The big news from this past weekend, you already said his name, Alvin Henderson, 4-star running back from Elba, Alabama, just down the road. This is a huge get. Flip from Penn State, but, to be honest, he should have never been committed. Auburn should have never let him commit to Penn State. He's been a big target for Auburn since Hugh Freeze got there. He's mentioned Auburn's been recruiting him since he was in the 8th grade. So to finally have him committed, have him coming in is really big for Auburn. And he is already taking the lead on being that kind of key, that lead recruiter in this 2025 recruiting class, which is always a good asset to have for any program. Another big offensive lineman. Auburn went a little bit out west, out to Bixby, Oklahoma, to get the commitment of 3-star offensive lineman Broderick Schull. Big kid, 6'5", 275. I mean, the size, the numbers are there. The numbers on these offensive linemen excite me. Bryce, you've heard me say it many times. I'm scared of 5-star linemen. Usually they get those 5 stars because they're just bigger than everybody they've played against their whole life, and they're just naturally stronger. I like 3 and 4-star linemen a little bit more than 5 stars, but that's just me being weird. But so a lot of hype around Broderick Schull as well, even though he is a 3-star. And then the last one I want to touch on, tight end commit Ryan G from Milton High School in Alpharetta, Georgia. His prospect profile doesn't jump off the page, but man, 6'5", 231, really big kid. I mean, it can be a huge asset. You've seen what Rivaldo Fairweather has done and did last year in Hugh Freeze's offense. We'll get to see another year of that. I think Ryan G can come in and play that role that Rivaldo Fairweather played last year and will play again this year. Really excited about him. Don't get turned off by him being a 3-star.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll say this: stars do matter.
They do.
But when you get into the 3-star rating, there's a lot of kids, and I work for a service that does this. A lot of kids that just get a 3-star rating slapped on them. That's it. That is what that is. I mean, that's just kind of how these things work sometimes.
And like I said about the linemen, stars matter. But I've been burned by a couple 5-star offensive linemen at Auburn, and so I'm almost at the point where I don't even want them. Just give me a 4-star, give me a 3-star that's had to work for it, But I'll take a 5-star. They look nice.
They look nice, and they look nice from a PR standpoint when you're trying to promote that next recruiting class when you look at 2026. Exactly. So we talk about, obviously, who's in the boat. Now, the big news that everyone wants to know is how is Auburn going to finish out kind of the rest of this recruiting season? And I'm kind of deeming, this recruiting season as leading up into a lot of these guys' senior years. That's going to be the biggest thing, is where they're going to obviously have that Big Cat weekend that we're going to take just a look at. Nothing finalized quite there yet, but those names will start to trickle in on all your favorite sites covering Auburn that you can kind of check out those stuff on. But Will, when we look at just like targets to add overall, I mean, you've been very keen on saying they need to build depth on the offensive line and defensive line and continue to stack that. You've also said the secondary, while there's some talent, it's not very deep in terms of what they have. So your kind of thoughts on some targets to add, maybe specific names that you're just kind of continuing to watch. And don't worry, folks, if you're listening or watching, we are going to be talking about one specific name to round out the show that a lot of Auburn fans are excited about. But I'll let you take it away.
Yep. We're not going to get to him yet. I'll start on the line of scrimmage. Offensive line, I already mentioned Tavares Dice, Broderick Shull, Cardi Smith. They're already in the boat. The big name here, 5-star offensive tackle from Blue Valley, Northwest Kansas, Andrew Babalola. This guy is, and I'm going to say this about a couple guys. This is an NFL prospect. You know, he's still at the high school level, but he is an NFL prospect. And, you know, that's not the boldest thing to say about a guy with a 5-star rating. But Andrew Babalola, just looking at a 6'6", 280. I mean, the number 1 offensive lineman in Kansas, number 3 offensive lineman in this class. This would be, in my opinion, the biggest get Auburn could add in this recruiting class. That includes the name everybody wants to hear that I'm not going to say yet, but I think getting this 5-star offensive lineman, Babalola is the type of guy that can come in and start for you at left tackle for 3 years. Like he's got that kind of potential. Another guy that Auburn's looking at that is probably, you know, an easier get for Auburn is a 3-star interior offensive lineman, Jacoby Ward from Benedictine Military School. If you're an Auburn fan and heard that name before, you'll hear it again in this podcast. That's over there in Savannah, Georgia. There's a quarterback on Auburn's roster that the last guy that we don't love to talk about, he did recruit, Holden Garner, coming from there. So Auburn really tapping into Benedictine Military School. It's kind of interesting because before Holden Garner, I'll be honest with you, I'd never heard of Benedictine Military School.
I will say this, Will, on them.
Okay.
They have smacked around Troup County the past couple of years en route to a state title. So there is a couple people that I know that are not big fans of them. But anyways, they also had a really good quarterback, I think, this past cycle, Jake Merklinger, who ended up at either Florida State or Tennessee. I don't remember which one he ended up at.
Their program's gotten a lot better just in the last couple of years. Moving over to the defensive line, I said Malik Autry, that 5-star from Opelika, 4-star. Bryce, who you know a little bit about. You got to see him, talk to him last week. Jordan Crawford, 4-star from Parker, Alabama. He was on a visit to LSU last weekend. But you feel pretty good, and I do too, about him sticking with his Auburn commitment.
Yeah, and just kind of offering a little insight on that. I mean, you know, you have kids that take official visits that are going to enjoy the process, and why not? You get 5 of them. You know, you go enjoy the free wine and dine and get to see places and do that. I just get the feeling, and having talked with Crawford and then knowing what LSU has on their big board, that Crawford's probably, I don't want to say he's not able to play at LSU. I think LSU understands where Crawford sits with his commitment with Auburn and hasn't really placed him as a massive priority, knowing kind of where his allegiance lies. So it would surprise me if Crawford kind of flipped to LSU specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. Auburn feels pretty good about keeping him too. So some other names to watch here on the defensive line, 4-star Nathaniel Marshall from Fenwick, Illinois. He's committed to Michigan. But you know, there's been a lot of names in the recruiting industry that have put him on flip watch, and Auburn is who to watch in his recruitment. 4-star Antonio Coleman, former Auburn commit, now Alabama commit from Saraland, Alabama. You know, it's not over yet. Auburn's not going to give up, but he took an official visit to Alabama this weekend. All signs kind of point that he's going to stick with Alabama, but like I said, Auburn's not going to give up. Another guy that hasn't gotten a ton of traction, not a lot of people, he's not been talked about a ton, is a junior college transfer, Xavion Hardy. Played at East Mississippi Community College, last chance you, this past year. You know, looks like a guy that can come in and contribute right away. You know, a lot of those JUCO guys that can. I don't know where he really sits on Auburn's priorities, so he's one to see there. But just thinking him being a JUCO guy, he could come in and contribute pretty quickly. Yeah, I'll do defensive back. Yeah, Auburn. You think Auburn probably needs 4 or 5 DBs in this class. They've got 3 committed. 4-star Devin Williams out of Beaufort, Georgia. 4-star Donovan Starr from Ravenwood, Tennessee, and 3-star Dante Core from Fort Walton Beach. You know, Auburn's not going to give up on anybody, and they're still recruiting the Ohio State commit, 5-star Naeem Alford from Parker, Alabama. Hard to tell with him, you know, what he's going to do, but I don't really know how Auburn feels about him either, about their chances with him. Obviously, an incredible prospect. Looks like he's going to be an incredible player, but I think he'll be tough to get to flip for Auburn to flip from Ohio State. But a guy that, starting to hear whispers that he's getting ready to commit to Auburn is 4-star Blake Woodby from St. Francis Academy in Maryland. Would get Auburn that 4th cornerback that they want, that 4th defensive back that they want. And, if you want 4 and 3 out of your 4 are 4 stars, you got to feel really good about that if you're Auburn. Last name on the defense I want to touch on is a linebacker. Actually, there's 2. One's an edge, one's a linebacker. So linebacker, 4-star Elijah Melendez, Miami commit, put out a tweet. Looked like he reaffirmed that commitment this weekend on his official visit to Miami. I think this one hurts. This one hurts Auburn. I think they really liked Elijah Melendez. They really wanted him, but he is going to stay with his Miami commitment and a 3-star from Benedictine Military School. The last defensive guy I want to talk about, Herbert III Scroggins. Any Tech fans listening, they are going to this is going to be fun to talk about, I think, on the Discord. Good time to plug the Discord. If you're not on there, we can talk about Third Scroggins if you want to. I don't know a ton about him. I know he's an edge rusher. And taking a peek at Georgia Tech's class, they seem to have the edge rushers they want. They're running out of room for edge rushers. But Scroggins, he's put out his top 4. It's Auburn, Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina. Took an official visit to Miami this weekend. He was scheduled to announce his commitment on June 25th. But he pushed that back this weekend after that visit. So a lot of development there.
Yeah.
So, just kind of have to wait and see on him. Let's see. Anybody else on the offense? Wide receiver. Let's talk about wide receiver. Like I said, Auburn had a really big and the best recruiting class of wide receivers Auburn's ever had last year. So they don't need wide receivers. They would like to add 1 or 2 from the high school ranks, and they're shooting high. Top target is 5-star Caleb Cunningham of Choctaw County, Mississippi. Although if you follow recruiting, you would have seen just a few days ago, he's been crystal balled. Predictions are coming in. All the experts thinks he's going to Alabama, which that would be. I'm imagining him with Cam Coleman on the other side, with Cam Coleman. It would be a disgusting wide receiver room for Auburn, and honestly, it would add to already probably the best room Auburn's ever had.
Yeah.
But it's just a prediction. He hasn't made a commitment yet. Auburn is they're not going to give up. And Hugh Freeze has shown that in this staff. They're not going to give up on anybody just because they commit somewhere. They're not going to give up on anybody. And I will talk about one running back, Usman Chroma from Lee County, Georgia, 4-star. He looks really good. I like him a lot. 5'11", 200 pounds. He's going to be like your bruiser. He looks like he's going to be an every down back in the SEC. If Auburn can pair him with Alvin Henderson, have 2 running backs in this class, and those are the 2 guys, Auburn is going to have strength and a lot of depth at a lot of positions.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at Usman Chroma's profile picture on 24/7 Sports. He looks like he's a 45-year-old man. Just a couple things I'll add to that. You talk about Blake Woodby over there. It definitely helps that one of his teammates is already committed in Bryce Deese. I mean, that helps.
Yes,
out of St. Francis Academy and there in Baltimore, really good program. And then on the Scroggins front, like I was talking with some people on the tech side of things, like it's a good sign for everybody involved. They feel like that he pushed it back. But you always have to be worried about NIL money, and NIL money is going to come into fact, especially coming off a Miami visit. We'll see. That is going to be a fun recruitment though, to watch and see what he does. All right. So Will, obviously we've talked about, names that are already on board, names that could get on board. And one of the big kind of events, we'll say, that a lot of programs use, and Auburn uses this at the end of July, kind of right before, the start of fall camp for the team as they start to turn focus to the 2024 season, is Big Cat Weekend. And these weekends are typically used to kind of I don't want to say a last ditch, but it's kind of that last big, moment for a lot of these kids to really be involved on campus. Yeah, they're going to get their visits during the season, but, hey, Auburn's going to be hopefully focused on having a winning season, getting to a bowl game and challenging to the upper echelon of the SEC. That being said, kind of talk about what Big Cat Weekend is. I know not a ton of names are finalized, but, I imagine some of your high profile commits are going to be there to help with recruiting efforts. But just what does this weekend mean for Hugh Freeze and company in terms of, capping off a summer kind of OV season and then just getting into the regular season?
Yeah, well, you talk about the importance and what it means to Hugh Freeze. You can just look back to last year. A huge success. His first Big Cat weekend. He didn't have one coming in. So last year, or at least last year's, well, I think he and Auburn would call it his first Big Cat weekend because it was such a big weekend, such a successful weekend. You saw Perry Thompson flip to Auburn that weekend. Another wide receiver, Malcolm Simmons, 4-star in last year's class, committed at Big Cat weekend. You saw the videos of the pool party. They jump in the pool. They throw Hugh Freeze in the pool after Perry Thompson flipped his commitment. So it's a huge weekend for Auburn. Like I said, not a lot of big lot of big names are fine. That list is not finalized. They're about a month away from that. But it's big, and Auburn is looking to kind of replicate last year's Big Cat weekend. Malik Autry's already come out and said, Big Cat weekend it's going to be huge for Auburn recruiting. It's going to be a huge day. So some of these names that we've mentioned, I would expect some of them to commit if they hadn't committed already at Big Cat weekend. But showing last year, and if you get commitments on a weekend like that, I think that shows what you're doing as far as official visits go. Because it looks like a ton of fun, and that recruiting staff does a really great job, which I will say, just in what 2 or 3 years, that recruiting staff has grown 2 or 3 times what it was before.
Former LSU kind of director of player personnel and a guy that's really helping with the efforts over there on the Plains, Will Redmond, kind of heading up a lot of that stuff. But I think that we talk about Big Cat weekend, we talk about big commits in general, and maybe we spend a little time on this one. The big name that everybody's looking towards, the rumors. I don't believe a local burger joint has named a burger after Juju Lewis yet, but let's talk about it, Will, because quarterback commits bring you brand recognition and they bring you good PR if you're a team. Hugh Freeze, as the offensive-minded guy is, Auburn fans, I think, are holding him accountable, saying, hey, this is the kind of guy you got to get. He's over there in Carrollton, essentially right on that Auburn or that Alabama, Georgia state line there. Talented young man. He reclassified down to 2025. So not the top overall ranked quarterback, but in the mix, was at the Elite 11 out there last week and impressed a lot of people. Your thoughts on what Juju Lewis is and Auburn's realistic shot to kind of flip him here? Obviously currently committed to USC. Colorado has really started to make a serious push here for his services as well. And then Auburn right in that mix. I know you were kind of hesitant because you said if he would have flipped, it probably would have happened during his OV, a couple weeks ago. But how much optimism do you still have in terms of his recruitment?
Juju Lewis's recruitment is one of the more interesting recruitments I've seen of the last couple of years. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And I think the question is is he worth the time? Is he worth the trouble? His talent, very much so, worth the time and the trouble.
Yeah.
But now in this era of college football we're in, is the money worth it? And you've heard his dad come out and say, well, wherever we commit, we're going to have people come with us. All these other top recruits are texting us, telling us we're going to follow you. And that would really be huge. That would get Auburn back to where Auburn should be, in many people's opinions, near the top of the SEC. But there's a lot of layers to this recruitment.
Yeah.
I said after his official visit, Auburn's best chances were probably to get him to flip at that official visit. It didn't happen, which really is not a surprise. Hearing all that's come out about his recruitment. He's going to take all the visits there, and there's nothing wrong with that. USC obviously looking like they're on the outside looking at, even though they hold his commitment, which again, is kind of the strange part of this. Colorado jumping in, kind of strange. You look at their recruiting class; they're down in the 80s, so they probably want Juju more than anybody else because they know people will come with him, and he'll help fill out that class and really help them take the next step in the Big 12. But there's a lot going on here. This one is probably going to go all the way down to signing day in December, I think. Whether he flips a commitment, if he decommits, whatever, I think he's open to everything. I still do like Auburn's chances with him. The proximity to home has really, in the last few weeks, really been a big talking point for him. He wants to be closer to home. He's kind of getting cold feet about going all the way to the West Coast and being so far from home. So Auburn being right down the road sounds like it'd be perfect for him. But there was another wrinkle that was added to this. Talks that now that him or his folks are saying he's a pocket passer, which that concerns me a little bit because we know Hugh Freeze, his offense is based in the RPO. And if you're going to have a successful RPO offense, you need a quarterback that's a threat to keep the ball and run some.
Yeah.
And, if Juju's not going to be willing to pull the ball and run a little bit and take some hits, I don't know how well he fits. And that's, if that's true. And, even whether it's true or not, Auburn, I think, is a little concerned about because they're still recruiting the Texas commit, KJ Lacey, another kid from Saraland, Alabama, who I think will be a perfect fit in the Hugh Freeze offense. So I don't know. I don't think Auburn could go wrong with either of these quarterbacks, but I like Auburn's chances with Juju better than I do with KJ Lacey. But like I said, I think, and even both of those guys, it may go all the way down to signing day. You're not going to know anything until they sign that letter of intent.
Yeah, and nowadays, even then, I mean,
right.
Who knows?
Right.
But, look, and I understand the commitment to USC. I mean, regardless of on-the-field success, you've produced the number one quarterback and taken in the draft this past year in Caleb Williams. Lincoln Riley has had multiple Heisman Trophy winners. He actually stacked multiple Heisman Trophy winners. He stacked multiple number one picks. Regardless of what you think about him as the head coach and the leader of a program, the guy can coach offense. He can coach a quarterback. So it makes sense why Juju Lewis would choose to go there. Now, and
you look where they are. They're in Los Angeles.
LA, they're moving to the Big Ten. This is going to be massive. It will be interesting. Isaiah Gibson and Justice Terry both decommitted from that USC class. So maybe some of the luster of what Juju thought he was going to be going in with. That's two other Georgia kids, by the way, that, decided to decommit. I think it's just going to be very interesting to see what Juju Lewis does. I've had the chance to see him work out multiple times. The talent is there. It's really, really good. But like you said, I don't want to use the word headache, but is it all worth it? That's going to be the big question. You don't want to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like, you don't just take Juju Lewis if he's not a fit. But then you also have to ask, is Juju Lewis the type of player where you change what you do because he's just that good? And I think those are some of the conversations that are probably happening within that recruiting room and that, coaching staff room. Like, if we bring this kid, Hugh Freeze might have to tinker with a couple of things because this kid's just so good. We have to have him on our roster. And that's going to be the big question. We've
talked about it before with coaches. The best coaches, they tweak year to year with the personnel they have. So, we've seen Hugh Freeze do that at his previous stops. I mean, his Ole Miss offenses were not the same as his Liberty offenses, and they were a little bit different every year. Obviously, the Auburn offense didn't look like the Liberty offense from 2 years ago. But, I don't have any doubts about what Hugh Freeze can do. The science behind it. I don't think he can be that mad scientist of offense and with quarterbacks. So if he takes Juju Lewis and Auburn is able to land Juju Lewis, I have no doubts that he'll be successful and that offense will be successful.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting recruitment to watch on all things Auburn. The number 5 class per 24/7 Sports and the 24/7 Sports composite ranking. Well, Auburn football getting ready to obviously enter into the month of July. There's going to be a no contact period. So not a ton of recruiting stuff that we'll be able to kind of, talk about. But obviously that Big Cat Weekend is something that you should stay tuned to the channel for. And all the other content as well as we get ready to do complete preview and predictions of a lot of individual teams. And I did realize we're going to have to keep tabs on the records because we can't say Auburn's going to beat so and so, and then when we do that school, that we say, well, they're going to lose, they're going to win that game. So we're going to have to keep tabs. We're going to have to be organized. But hey, good chance for you to stay tuned to the channel as well. And if you're listening, we do appreciate you, whether that's on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. My name is Bryce Koon. He is Will Maness, and we will catch you next time here on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.